Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you for tuning in to our Passover teaching, Jewish Passover and the Christian Paschal Mystery, and part of this Jerusalem talk series. And so again, the spirit of going up to Jerusalem for the three feasts each year. What are those three feasts? What's some of that spirit?
Passover.
So there are many Jewish feasts. There's more feasts than just the three Passover, the three pilgrimage feasts, of course. But there are three of them where they're supposed to go up to Jerusalem if they can. Okay, so here's this first one is Pesach. Everybody, Pesach. Okay, the second one is Shavuot.
Shavuot.
Shavuot. The third one is Sukkot. Sukkot. Good.
Tabernacles.
Okay, so Pesach is Passover. Pascha. The verb pasach means to pass over. Okay, and what was passed over? The houses when they put the blood on the lintel, right? And so this sign of redemption is the blood, right? The blood had to be spilled, and the animal is being this unblemished lamb is being killed to keep the angel of death from killing the firstborn, right? As the end of the last of the plagues and the worst of the plagues. And so in some ways, there's something of divine purpose and punishment that's happening, and it's wow, it's really intense. That's coming upon Egypt that night, right? And it's good to keep this in context of what's happening to the Egyptians, and the Jewish people are being spared. There's this purpose for freeing them from Egypt, Pesach. Okay, and they're being freed in order to, what was the original question that Moses asked for? To go worship. Yeah, in the beginning, it wasn't, let's get out of here permanently. It was just let us go for a couple days and worship. Okay, and where were they going to worship?
The desert.
On Mount Sinai, right? The Lord called them to Mount Sinai. What happens on Mount Sinai in the end?
The first covenant.
Okay, the Lord gives the covenant how?
Ten Commandments.
Through the law. Okay, the Lord gives the law. So Pentecost is the feast of that giving of the law, Shavuot. Okay, what does Shavua mean? Do you know what Pentecost, like why is it Pentecost? There's another Jewish name in English for the feast? Sometimes we say the Feast of Weeks. Okay, in Hebrew, week is Shavua. Okay, so Shavuot is the plural. Shavuot, weeks. Okay, so it is the Feast of Weeks, literally. And how many weeks?
7.
7 weeks. Okay, plus 1 day, which is why Pentecost means from the root word of 50 in Greek, right? So Shavuot happens when? 7 times 7 days after Easter. Okay, so that timing is really important. The connection between these two feasts is clear. Okay, and we're being freed in order to go and renew that covenant, receive the law. Okay, and then the third pilgrimage feast, Sukkot. A sukkah is a tabernacle or tent, right, or a booth. Okay, what is that remembering?
Set up the tents in the desert.
So they're in the desert for how long? For 40 years, dwelling in tents. And who else is dwelling in the tent in the middle of the camp? The
Tabernacle.
Lord, right? Okay, so those three feasts are really connected and really are the complete story of the Exodus, right? First of all, the freedom. Second of all, the giving of that covenant. And then third of all, living out that covenant, learning to trust, okay, and dwelling with God. Okay, and there's the mystical meaning that ties these three feasts together too. Do you know what the essential elements are of a Jewish wedding? Okay, so there's like the time of being engaged, of pledging yourselves to one another, of which is like being free, cutting yourselves, in some ways leaving the world, this process of leaving the world. And then which maybe corresponds to Pesach. And then what's this like really concrete sign of the marriage that maybe corresponds to those tablets of the law? And this is something that Jewish couples typically will hang in their dining room, and it'll be calligraphied and stuff.
Is it the vows?
The vow?
Well, the contract. It's really the contract, okay, that the parents draw up, which had a lot more meaning way back when, but today it really has a symbolic meaning. And today, of course, it's also a question of legally binding them, right? So that's why for us, part of our wedding ceremony that isn't as important. We have the vows, but we also have the signing of the wedding license, right? And so there's this articulation of and the details of that. The ketubah, katav, kotev is to write. The ketubah is the contract. Okay, okay, and then the other essential element of marriage. Under the 10, right? Okay. In fact, for us Catholics, we say you have to consume your marriage, right? Or else you have to get a dispensation. Right? You have to consume your marriage. And so after they've had the ceremony and the the party starts, but the couple goes aside for 15 minutes into a closed room. And that might be the first time for ultra-Orthodox Jews, that might be the first time they've ever been alone together. And they need to be alone together like 15 minutes, like long enough to do the act, that might be the time when they had their first kiss, but it's a time of intimacy and usually not a time when they're going to go all the way, but it's symbolic of that now you're dwelling together. Now you have your own hut. Now you have your own private space. Okay, so you can say these three pilgrimage feasts also symbolize the nuptial love between God and his people, right? And there's also an agricultural meaning of these feasts, that there are different species that are offered, and different grains that are offered that correspond to the different harvests in the spring and the fall. Okay, so I think it's important to keep Pesach in that context of the three pilgrimage feasts. Observe the month of Abib and keep the Passover for the Lord your God. Oops. And you shall offer the Passover sacrifice to the Lord your God from the flock or the herd at the place which the Lord will choose to make his name dwell there. You shall eat no leavened bread with it. 7 days you shall eat it with unleavened bread, the bread of affliction. For you came out of the land of Egypt in hurried flight, that all the days of your life you may remember the day when you came out of the land of Egypt. Okay? So practically speaking, right, they have to have a lamb, which that became obsolete, right? But then this question of the unleavened bread, and you shall eat no leavened bread, and in fact you should rid your house of all leavened bread, which we'll get to that. That means a lot of different. Actually, I just have it on my sheet. That means different products. What are different food products that have leaven in them?
So is Aviv the same as Nissan? I heard Nissan's the first month.
Observe the month
Is
of
Aviv.
Aviv. Actually, it's a different name for Nisan, and it's today it just means spring in Hebrew. But Aviv is a Hebrew word. Nisan is from Babylonia. The months got renamed when they were in Babylonia. In fact, good question. Okay, so yeah, going by this Babylonian calendar. So during the week of Pesach, from the 15th to the 21st of Nisan, is forbidden to eat leavened products, and even forbidden to possess them. or to make use of them. Okay, so not to eat them. And this includes the five leavened cereals: wheat, oats, rye, spelt, barley, including any products, liquid or solid, coming from them, like bread, cookies, pasta, beer, whiskey, etc., etc. Okay, so that's a lot of no leaven shall be seen with you in all your territory for 7 days. Okay, which is that's a lot to do, right? And so there's this real symbol of the unleavened bread. Okay, you're gonna make unleavened bread. You're not gonna have any leaven, and so the Jews do a lot of cleaning and getting rid of these products or loaning them to their Christian or Muslim neighbors, giving them and saying, "Okay, I'm giving these to you, but I want them back next week." Um, okay, uh, and so during the Passover Seder, we saw that there's these three um, loaves of unleavened bread, three matzot, and two of those symbolize that abundance, like at a Shabbat meal. There's always two loaves that are blessed at Shabbat and a Sabbath meal, Friday evening or Saturday. And then there's another one that's added for the special feast. Okay. And then the afikoman is taken from like the middle of these loaves, and that has its own meaning. And the afikoman, which was known as the lamb. And so the different symbolism we talked about Saturday night, if you were there. Okay, another important aspect of the feast is to read the story of the Exodus, but it's a special reading that has 15 different points they go through, and an order of 15 points. So it's Seder. The word Seder means order, and that means that they have to go through all those different points of the reading of the Haggadah, and that quotes a lot of different rabbis of more or less Jesus's time before. And when they read it doesn't really mention Moses' name because it really wants to emphasize that it's God that is saving them. Okay, when your son asks you in time to come, what is the meaning of the ordinances which the Lord our God has commanded you, then you shall say to your son, we were Pharaoh's slaves in Egypt, and the Lord brought us out of Egypt with a mighty hand. So this is the basics of the Haggadah that has been expanded into all these rabbi sayings and conversations and stuff. So really the text that we did at the Seder meal Saturday evening that I see at Christian Series has nothing to do with the elements maybe are the same, but the text itself is very different and confusing. And so if you sit down to a Jewish Seder, you'd be like, wow, this text has nothing to do with, what I learned with. Behind it is, of course, the Exodus story and some of the elements of the different cups. But you'd be surprised that it doesn't correspond that much. Okay, and they count out each of the 10 plagues. There's also a lot of things that they have this rabbinic text that signifies that this has been transmitted from generation to generation. But they also have the challenge of saying this text is supposed to transmit our faith today. Okay, so the goal at the Seder meal is for the Haggadah to be, number one, faithful to this transmission. And really, we're going to say every word that has come down to us through the ages. But we're also going to do it with all kinds of games and conversations so that our kids stay engaged because it's for them. The point is for them to receive it. Number one. Number two, that there's a real step of faith that happens. The Passover is meant to be what we call memorial, what Jewish liturgy calls memorial and Catholic theology calls memorial, which is a reliving of the event. Okay, so as they tell the story, each person is supposed to share how the Lord has saved me this year. Okay, which is something I'd love to integrate. I think our parish would love if we do that during our Seder next year, is really to take the time to say, wow, what has the Lord done in my life this year? How has the Lord freed me? Okay, and so so that's why it takes so long. It goes into the wee hours of the night, also because that's kind of the tradition as they're reading it, is they're reading about these rabbis who celebrated the Passover into the wee hours of the night. It was during the night that the lamb was supposed to be immolated and the blood put on the post. And the idea is is to be there during the night where the Lord saved us during the night when the angel of death was passing. Okay, so the idea of let's kind of stay up all night and do this because it's during this night that we were saved. Okay, so there's a lot of things that we can start to connect this with our celebration of Easter, our celebration of what we call the Paschal mystery, or if do you know what the word is in the Eastern rites of the church for Easter? Easter is a very, or just in Romance languages, for example, in French or in Italian or Spanish, how do you say Easter? In French, Pâques. Okay, the S falls out. That's why there's a little circumflex, the hat over the A. In Spanish, Pascua. Okay. In the Eastern rites, like in the Byzantine Church, Pascha, like I wrote it here. Okay, so we kind of got shortchanged in the English language because we gave a name to our feast that was trying to say, well, this is like a Christian Easter because Easter was from pagan religions, right? So the word Easter, I think it's kind of poor that we keep using the word Easter, right? And the Ukrainian Catholic Church's catechism even is called Christ our Pascha. Christ is our Pascha. Christ is our deliverance. Christ is our redemption, right? Okay, and so we might say that that's just the fact that through the Christian Paschal mystery, what happens that's similar to the Jewish Passover, that's so essential is that God saves. That God saves, that it's God who saves. That it's through Jesus Christ and it's through all these events. Just like in the Passover, it's through Moses and it's through his events. But the point is that God saves. And then the point for a Jew is not that God just saves the people or God saves in general, but God saves me as a part of that people. So I think there's a lot of things you could say that are very similar about what we mean when we say Paschal mystery. Right? And just that whole theology of memorial, like for the Mass, like this is where we get it, right? Is that the Jews consider that each year as they celebrate the Passover, they're reliving, they're there with Moses going through the Red Sea. Okay, this is really how we root this if you talk theologically. Okay. Now the connection between Pesach and Pentecost, can we try to make a connection there between the Christian meaning and the Jewish meaning? I think there's a lot to explore here because we don't know that much about Pentecost, right? We're just not very good at Pentecosting as Catholics, right?
Holy Spirit comes.
Okay, Pentecost, gift of the Holy Spirit, gift of a new law. What happens it's sort of the birth of the church at Pentecost, right? So in some ways, the Jewish people have been saved from Pharaoh at the Exodus, but then at Mount Sinai, when they receive the law, they receive something that kind of constitutes them as people, and they have this new purpose, right? So I feel like that's sort of what happened to the people of God at Pentecost. Is there's this law that's given this new direction, and now they're ready to go, right? But the fact that Pesach and Pentecost have this connection, these 50 days, and Omer means to count, to number, to say, and counting the Omer. So the Omer is these 50 days. It's like a calendar of 50 days between Pesach and Pentecost. That the Jews every day they pray during the two feasts. They uh, say which day it is. It's kind of a countdown that happens each day. Okay, so what would that mean for us? Think that there's a tension, that there's something that's being deployed at Pentecost or on our way towards Pentecost, right? That Easter has visited us, the Paschal mystery has happened to us, but that grace is moving, is being deployed, and the readings are so specific and amazing between every day, like all the daily readings, right? Between Passover and Pentecost, between Easter and Pentecost for us, right? It really is a precious 50 days. So I think just that connecting those two feasts is something that we can also say is similar in Judaism. Okay, of course, the whole theology of the Lamb, right? And as some of you were there Saturday night, I talked about how, of course, the most Jews today, all the Jews today, don't uh, immolate the Paschal Lamb anymore. And in Jesus' time, some of them did, some of them didn't. But there's a little minority of bad Jews, of Jews that the Jews don't consider Jews, who still immolate the lamb today. There's about 2,000 of them in Israel. Do you know who they are? The Samaritans. Okay, and so I had the privilege of being there for their immolation of the lambs. And before they went home to put blood on the lintel, they each put a little blood on their forehead. And then during their prayers, they raised up the lambs and then put them down into the barbecue hole, the barbecue pit that had been prepared for each one in the ground, a hole in the ground where they put the lamb down and then cover it with awning and then cover it with mud. And now when they hoisted it down, the thing is the lamb stands vertical in this pit where the fire's in the bottom. So in order to keep the lamb from sliding down the spigot, there's a crossbar, and his paws are tied to the crossbar. So the symbolism for the early Christians might have been really clear on this, that the lamb is being slain is on this cross, right? But the fact that cross, that spotless lamb, is a substitution, that the firstborn should have died in each family, and that lamb is substituting for it. And so the substitution, the theology of substitution, that Jesus has died for us, that Jesus has died for me, that my sonship comes from the fact that Jesus has died for me.
So, Father, would the Jews at the time of Christ have baked their lambs the same way?
Right, that's what we think. I mean, the Samaritans really are preserving ancient Judaism. Yeah, and so Jews at the time of Christ, I don't know, maybe Jews be in the hundreds of years before Christ, maybe they lost it. But obviously this was and early Christians, they were in touch with both Samaritans and Jews. Christianity spread really quickly in Samaria. So was this still a Jewish tradition like that? I don't know, but Samaritans probably were doing it the same way for 3,000 years, So, okay,
Father, how
Exodus
did you say
24:8.
that? How did you say, what was it? What to the lamb? What was the word for it?
Well, they put the lamb on a spigot and put it down into a pit, but they put its paws on a crossbar, so it looked like a crucifixion, right?
But what did you call that? Like the title?
Well, the immolation of the lamb,
Immolation. Yeah, I'm sorry.
immolation, the sacrifice of the lamb, right, is a substitution for that firstborn, right? Moses took the blood and sprinkled it on the people and said, "Behold the blood of the covenant which the Lord has cut with you all in accordance with all these words." So this is when he comes down off of Mount Sinai. So there's something of the blood and redemption through the blood of the covenant also that has a connection. This is the Pentecost story. This is more when Moses comes down off the mountain, but the fact that the covenant is renewed through blood, right? And it's certainly for us so much of the meaning of our Eucharist. Okay, that's all I had, and I wanted to ask you guys if you have questions, comments. And I think I'll stop the recording there. Thanks a lot, those who tuned in or are watching this recording, and you can email us with your questions. Thanks. Stop recording.